Possiamo cominciare I nostri lavori.
Can we make a start? Interpretation is available in 6 languages, active and passive, and the number is the number on your dial, 2 for English. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you to Professor Bardi. We know one another very well. I'll be speaking straight away. And as I have to officially, I have to inform you that the meeting will be filmed and distributed on the internet. We have the agenda which is approved. The only point is the conference on democracy in the European Union with 2 sections. The first one organised by the Observatory on Political Parties and Representation, the OPPR, the European Union Democracy Observatory, Political Foundations at European Level, 5 years in promoting democratic political culture in the European Union. We'll be hearing representatives from 8 separate political foundations working at the moment, and a couple of highly placed university professors, and this section will continue after lunch with conclusions. At 3 o'clock we will be hearing the conclusions from the morning statements by Professor Bardi, and the second part in the afternoon. After that, we'll be dealing with access to electoral rights, citizenship, and the franchise in local, regional, national and European elections. If that agenda is agreed, I'll straight away move on to the first part of this conference on democracy in the European Union, political foundations at the European level. And I'm pleased to announce that at this seminar we have 2 groups of students as well, one from the Pantheon University in Paris and one from Louvain University. Just by way of introduction, the status of political parties is vital, and the Constitutional Affairs Committee is dealing with this. This work is meant to be wound up on the 11th of March, the rapporteur being Mrs. Giannakou from Greece. A vast number of amendments to the original text. Mrs. Giannakou is working to try to organise compromise amendments that will cover a lot of the amendments to get a broad-based consensus from political groupings in the Union.
All'approvazione di questo.
We are hoping that these statutes of political parties and foundations and their funding will go through, so that by 2014 we will have a new instrument, which is the importance of today's conference. I'll give the floor now straight to Professor Bardi by way of introduction. He's at Pisa University, Comparative Politics and International Politics. He was president of the European Consortium for Political Research. Many contributions in comparative study of political parties. With Professor Peter Meyer, he co-founded the Observatory on Political Parties and Representations, of which he's been co-director since it was set up. That's the main point, so I'll give Professor Bardi the floor. Thank you. Mr. Cassini, yes, we've known one another for a long time, so by way of introduction in Italian, can I thank Mr. Schulz for hosting this conference. There will be a small reception at lunchtime between the two sessions, and I'm going to change to English.
Languages of the European University Institute, and having thanked properly in our own native tongue, Mr. Casini. Actually, Mr. Casini has already told you a number of the things I was going to say, what the political foundations are all about, what is the state of the AFCO report, which will update the existing normatives, the existing legislation on parties and foundations. All I can tell you is that we felt that this is a particularly important juncture for the foundations, since they're now on the verge of being called to operate under new rules, not terribly new rules, but anyway, rules that imply some significant change, and also at a time when they have 5 years under their belt, they have experience, they have done something in these 5 years, and we're all very eager to hear what this is. So it is time, we think, to take stock and to produce an assessment of how the political foundations at the European level have interpreted their role, and how also, in consideration of this new legislation that is about to be approved, how to look at the future and at the way they might help the European Union, European Union's development, also obviously with a view to the development, democratic development of the member states. We don't want to separate these two things too much. Having just looked at the results of the Italian elections, I feel that there is a very strong connection between democracy at European level and democracy in the member states. We used to think there were two separate things. Actually, we didn't even need democracy in the European Union as long as we had democracy in the member states. Well, I don't know. We may need more democracy in the European Union if we end up having less democracy in the member states. But this is my personal view, my personal comment, which I had to throw in as a reaction to my reading of the electoral results in Italy. You know, stayed up all night to try and find out what was going to happen. So you will forgive me for this. Anyway, so we laid down a few questions which could serve as guidelines for the foundations. Anyway, the exponents here, whom I thank very deeply for their presence, may have accepted our guidelines or not. It doesn't matter. I think the guidelines were only put down to give perhaps the audience an idea of what was going to happen. What we expect is for the foundations to tell us what they think and what they want to do. So you may disregard completely what I'm about to say, but anyway, we had 6 questions basically. What is the foundation's role? Obviously, it's the most obvious one. How did they, as individual foundations, interpret their role in the last 5 years? So we would like to know something about the past. Through which activities, in carrying out their activities, do they act as single entities or as networks of national or functional entities, which is something, of course, that the law calls for. Does this vary according to different activities? Are there times when they act as individual foundations, at times when they act as networks? And how do the foundations view the evolution of the European Union in the near future, also considering the Commission's proposal, which we should be hearing more about on March 11, we hear. Okay, so this is it. I don't want to take more time from the protagonists of today's event. I thank them all very much again. I thank the audience for being here. And this is it for me. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. I now give the floor to representatives of European political foundations, and the chairman has the severe duty of keeping you within a fixed speaking time. There are a lot of you, so quick sums indicate that we have to allow you a maximum of 12 minutes if you want some debate with MEPs at the end and with one another. So I think I'll read out the names of the speakers, and sorry if Italians always mangle names. And if I can ask them to speak one after another. Javier Macias, President of the Centre, Moritz Kopitas, Tommy Hooten, Director of the Centre for European Studies, Yanis de Jong, Manager of the European Christian Political Foundation, Ms. Medved, the President of European Liberal Forum, Anja Skripek, Senior Research Fellow of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, Ms. Gavesler from the Green European Foundation, and Ms. Mazzotti, the Project Manager of the Institute of European Democrats, and Mr. Walter Bayer, Coordinator of Transform. So I'll start by giving the floor to Mr. Matthias.
Good morning. Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting us along this morning. And I'd like to just run you through quickly the Centre Moritz Compitas. We were established in 2008, bringing together foundations, organisations, social and cultural bodies, those defending self-determination and linguistic autonomy in the European Union. We are called Moritz Kopitas because he was a famous Flemish European politician and one of the founders of the European Free Alliance. The Moritz Kopitas Centre works in research and tries to input to the debate on European policy making, looking specifically at regional, democratic and independent movements. It began as a European political foundation linked to the European Liberal Alliance, and with the backing of the European Parliament, the Moritz Kopitas Centre began to go its own way by trying to input into the ideological debate elements of democracy and arguments for change to the political architecture in Europe. We tried to build an alternative debate in Europe based on the rights of peoples and the collective citizens' rights. What we established is that different levels of self-government have helped to build welfare and conflict resolution within states and regions that are represented in our organisation. And we are also of the firm conviction that accepting national and cultural pluralism in the current EU member states will help to enrich our democracies. In the context of globalisation and with the deep-seated changes underway, which tend to take financial and political decision-making away from citizens, we felt the need to build alternatives to ensure that people were involved and ensure that we had institutional tools to develop economic policies that actually serve the public interest. National, cultural and linguistic rights are critical, as are social rights, which have been so hard fought by our people over the years. Democratic decay, the lack of respect for democracy, the crisis have meant that we've seen a shift in political debate and ideological discussion. societies are trying to find new certainties and are beginning to rework the political maps that were previously fixed. And that's why for many years we've been warning of the risks of economic globalization, with the risks inherent in terms of sovereignty for our regions. I have to say, though, that the road is not straightforward. And we don't think we should keep ploughing down this road and simply cut budgets at the regional or state level. The European Political Foundation is trying to deal with a difficult challenge and doing it in a stage-by-stage basis. We are monitoring the political developments in Europe, and in so doing, the Centre, through its studies, through its publications, is looking at the question of internal enlargement with the European Union, looking at the institutional benefits that nations would experience if they were to become fully fledged members of the European Union. Our argument was that the democratic principle should prevail, guaranteeing European citizens the free choice of their nation, without any limits on their sovereign decision-making, without losing their rights in terms of European citizenship. Recognising genuine freedom is at the core of the alternatives that we believe exist from north to south, to east to west, from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean, for states that regard themselves as political bodies, running against the centralising force of big states. The Centre has also tried to grapple with the economic difficulties and the social consequences of the crisis. And in stressing autonomy, we have found an antidote to the worst effects and found a way to work towards well-being and prosperity in Europe. Galicia, but also Wales or Catalonia, I'm from Galicia, by the way, have held conferences and debates organised by the Moritz Kopita Centre to look at the crisis from the perspective of individual people, and also looked at studies and publications in which we are arguing that it's important to focus on the role of states without a nation. We also need to stress the economic role of these small states over the coming decade. And we are convinced that it's important to move towards sovereignty and democracy in terms of economic governance, given the ultra-liberal abuses and excesses that we see. The Moritz Kopita Centre has also forged links with similar organisations of movements from outside Europe, coming closer to the World Social Forum, where we have argued for a European Union as a peacemaker around the world and able to solve conflicts in the global arena. We have worked on initiatives of common interest, focusing on working together, looking at analysis of shared thought, and the Centre has instigated various projects that are research-based, looking, for example, at the geostrategic role of states without a nation, which will be published soon online, and another study where we have tried to bring together documents and papers which look at the history of the political movements that have fought for the rights of people in nations without a state in Europe. These activities are, of course, cultural and social in nature, but our specific political focus has gone through the liberal movement. Now, what we've tried to do is to build a network of exchange with bodies and organizations. We had 7 founding members. Within our first 2 years, we had reached 15 partners. And now we've got centres in the Basque Country, in Flanders, Catalonia, Galicia, and the Balearic Islands, in Aragon, Macedonia, Corsica, Wales, Sardinia, Brittany, and others. To conclude, the crisis is beginning to exacerbate scepticism and disappointment surrounding the European project. And given that the risks inherent for democracy and politics and the European social model are recognised, it's critical to strengthen the networks and international alliances as the shared construction of political projects at the European level. Foundations can be a powerful tool to achieve this aim, provided that their work is financed and facilitated. If we as well recognise pluralism that currently exists in democracy. And we should involve all nations, even those who don't currently have a nation state, strengthening the role of people and making sure that citizens have a new role by decentralising and ensuring that they are involved in the political process. We should also think about diversifying the current political maps rather than falling into the trap of failed bipartisan models. And at the same time, we shouldn't restrict the guarantees for financing bodies that have a smaller representation, because democracy is all about respecting minorities as well. I think these are 2 elements that will help us to strengthen the work of foundations going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now give the floor to Tomi Huutanen.
Good morning, dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank the Committee on Constitutional Affairs of the European Parliament, all the MEPs who have worked on this topic, on the European political parties, but especially now with the foundations. Your work and contribution to this debate is much appreciated. Also, President Cassini, for all your support. Also, thanks to Observatory on Political Parties and Representation and the European Union Democracy Observatory from the European University Institute for your work and contribution. In my presentation, I will follow the guidelines of Professor Bardi. Basically, my core of my intervention is I'm going to speak about the role of the foundation. It's what has been the interpretation of the EPP family on that, and how it has transmitted to activities. And then on request also, if time allows, maybe some comments on the vision of our foundation on the future of the European Union, which is of course a big question. I think that when we start to discuss about the role of the foundation, it's very healthy to first see what it says in the regulation. But because at least in our case, that was a very starting point when we started 5 years ago to build that foundation. I just quote-unquote read. Political foundation at European level means an entity or network of entities which has legal personality in a member state, is affiliated with the political party at European level and through its activities within the aims and fundamental values pursued by the European Union, underpins and complements the objectives of the political party at European level by performing in particular the following task: observing, analysing and contributing to debate, developing activities linked to the European public policy issues, developing cooperation with different entities, and serving as a framework for national political foundations. And that was very starting point for us. So for us, the work of the European political foundations for the democratic political culture of Europe is essentially European democratic political culture. For us, we have contributed in order to create a European political space where the political debate is not limited by the member state borders, but the political debate from the north has an impact on deep south and vice versa. And of course, that this debate should be based on values, on different views and visions of future. And that is basically which we have been aimed for. In that framework, how the CES, the Centre for European Studies, as the political foundation and the think tank of the EPP, has defined itself, and its mission is to advance centre-right ideas and thinking. So to clarify, in many political foundations in Europe, especially in the member states, they have also strong accent on democracy promotion, but for us it's especially a think tank work. And our specific objective is to be a leading and innovative reference point for debate, ideas and proposals in European policy making with the centre-right views. And this basically we do together with our 26 member foundations, which gives us the critical network. All our member foundations, first of all, have a relation with the EPP member party. So this is a very important point, because that way we belong to the same political family. Together with our member foundations, each year we launch 100 different kind of activities, including research, events and publications, but nowadays also various of online activities. 70% of those activities are done outside of Brussels. For us, it's important to work outside of Brussels bubble, as we say, and only in this way, working with our member foundations, we can create a real impact in all the states. Our working way is to create expertise on specific topics and also specific ways of working. We try to be innovative, we try to be playful, we try to try new things, and those experiences in the safe environment we try to then contribute to our political family, also to our party. Specifically, we are focusing on the 6 different topics, first of all, on party structures and EU institutions in our research. Secondly, economic and social policy reforms, EU foreign policy, values, ethics and religion, and energy and environment. For that, during 5 years, we have already published 150 different kind of publications. That means one publication each week. Our major yearly events include, for example, in economic topic, we have Economic Ideas Forum, which in 2 days gathered the leading businessmen, political representatives, and academics, which has, in our view, impact on our economic debate. In our research, our most grandiose research project tried to aim the views and opinions of each member state through our member foundations. We have last year we concluded a massive study on immigration. This year we try to focus on the reflecting on the different responses to crisis, and we have also one study now on studying populism. Also, we have various online initiatives where we have managed to get real participants. For example, we have a Del Barroso project, which through Barroso was asking the citizens there in 2009, before the elections, what is, in your view, the European Union should focus on, and we got more than 150,000 participants online. So to mention, as I already mentioned, that the key is there, the member foundations and cooperation with the member foundations. If you look the mission and the regulation which governs us, it's very ambitious. However, the reality with the political foundations is that even the largest political foundations has a little bit more than 10 permanent staffers. That means that one staffer has to change the political culture of each member state. So of course it's a big challenge, and this, in order to do that, it's only through the network and through our member foundations. I think also in this whole debate and debate on the role of political foundations, I think the key element is the relation with the party. In various discussions, also within different European political foundations, there is a strong accent to this independence, and I think, and we think it's also very important. But of course, especially now in the new regulatory debate, should be remembered that actually the regulation connects the political foundation together with its party quite tightly, to the extent that in operative terms, every year when the foundation applies the funds from the European Parliament, there has to be a statement from the European political party saying that the foundation really is supporting the objectives of the party. So in that, the party for political foundations, it's a possibility, but it's in a certain way it's a risk. It is a possibility in the sense that when the political foundation cooperates with the party, it has access to decision makers. It has access to different national member parties and politicians. And so also the Centre for European Studies, for example, the Centre for European Studies had an elemental role when the EPP was drafting its basic programme. The CS participates in the different working groups of the EPP party, where all the member parties are presented, bringing its contribution, bringing its ideas. And also, in the case of the EPP party has what we call pre-minister council meetings before the head of the state meeting. EPP has a meeting also before the ministerial meetings, and we have during these 5 years also started to cooperate with the party in order to bring our ideas, bring our suggestions to these ministerial meetings. And this is the positive side. Of course, the challenge is always to keep the balance. When you tap with the party, also you have to be careful that you are not totally dictated, or that the workload of the party doesn't dictate the work of the foundation. But that is the third element. So to be innovative reference point, the first, second, the aspect of cooperation with the member foundation, and third, the cooperation with the party. Concerning the different proposals, what the CS has done during the years, for us, the current one of the biggest challenges of the European Union is of course, apart from the economic crisis, the fact that the institutional evolution is taking big steps, and what we have as a result is a democracy deficit. The CS has worked last year, launched a paper which set various proposals, which presented more the further steps for more integration. It presented, underlined the fact that in order to European to have the legitimization, it has to strengthen the citizen ownership, and we made various proposals. For example, the introduction in the short run, introduction of transnational list of candidates for the European Parliament. We emphasised that it's important for the European political parties in upcoming elections to make emphasis that the elections has a strong, in that election the parties have a candidate and they have a strong role in the campaign. And in our view, what is very clear is that at a certain point we need the treaty change, and we need to take further steps. Essentially, we see that the European Parliament has a major role in this development. We see also that in the future the President of the Commission should be not only the President of the Commission, but it should be the same person with the President of the Council. And so in essence, those have been our key proposals. I would conclude by saying that for the crisis, it is clear that for us the building of the European Union is not at its end, and it's but very much in the beginning. And in that building, the European political foundations are important building block. I stop here, and I would like to thank the committee chair.
Grazie.
Thank you, and thank you for more or less keeping within your speaking time with a small overshoot. I'll now give the floor to Johannes de Jong, the manager of the European Christian Political Foundation.
For this introduction, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the AFCO Committee for the invitation. I prepared a short presentation on our organization. I hope the technique will cooperate. It apparently does, which is a miracle in its own. My name is Johannes de Jong. I represent the European Christian Political Foundation. We have been a recognized foundation since 2011. A lot has already been said by my colleagues on the regulation and under which we work. We work as an association, as a network, as a European umbrella of national think tanks who share the same values. And since we are relatively new, I will start with our values and then connect them to our activities. What we want is that we work towards a Europe of relational values. When there was the presentation of the economic outlook of the Eurozone by Mr. Rehn, it was very interesting to see that he made an interesting remark that the financial markets in Europe are improving, but the economies are in decline. And this is very interesting because it seems now that we improved the one section of our economy by deteriorating the other section of our economy. What is the relation between the markets and the people? And then brings us to the next question. What kind of Europe do we want? Do we want a Europe that follows the logic of the markets, a Europe of efficiency, of endless liberalization? It seems to us sometimes that there's a kind of dogma of privatization. How does this relate to people? Or do we want a Europe that values the people and follows the logic of values and relations? What is now needed in Europe when we ask these questions? Then we ask the question, whose Europe? Whose economy? To whom belongs it to? And in this Europe, are we in this together or not? Or are we a Europe of winners and losers? And then we talk obviously about solidarity. But then the question arises, what is the source of European solidarity? What do people actually need? And then we ask the basic question, what are people? We all have a mother. We all eat and drink. We all, when we work with someone else. So biologically, ecologically, and economically, we are relational beings. This is, in our view, the relational reality of humanity. And this is also the Christian understanding of the human being. So what are the preconditions for real human relational existence, we asked. The first is freedom. And this encompasses freedom of conscience, freedom of faith, which also includes, of course, freedom not to believe. And these are the fundamentals for diversity and democracy. And these are crucial European values. And, of course, individuality, based on human dignity, which is the foundation of the unique value of every human being. Without these two, a relational existence is not possible. And these are core values of the European Union. And what practical values are derived from that? Solidarity, obviously. Mutual responsibility, not own responsibility, mutual responsibility. Compassion. reconciliation. These are fundamental fundamental practical values for the European Union. So what did we do as foundation with this? We have Europe's Values research project that stretched from 2011 to 2012. We around that organized conferences in Romania, the Netherlands, Ukraine, Poland, Copenhagen, what we call the State of Europe Forum. And we will publish the outcome of this research in 2013. And then we derived from that some core principles for policy, which are these three. Co-ownership of the economy. My colleagues already talked about how people related to the economy again. In our view, the economy belongs to the people. They are not just subject to it. They should be part of it. They should own it. And then the same applies, obviously, for society. Co-ownership of society. And here we think this is also the role of the European parties and foundations. They create a European atmosphere that makes it possible that people are owners of the European political process. And we emphasize the crucial role and importance of the family. When it comes to the economy, we had, for example, last year, in 2012, we had the Pan-European Congress Values Foundations for Europe's Economy, here in Brussels, in the same European Parliament. And we also will have a focus on the same subject at our State of Europe Forum in 2013 in Dublin. And we organized a conference around this subject in Vilnius, Lithuania. One of our publications, After Capitalism, is devoted to this idea of relational values applied to the economy. And we think that we need a Europe of involved people, and we try to support that process. First of all, with youth seminars, in which we try to involve young people in the European political process. And we organize them in Strasbourg, Brussels, Timisoara, and we hope to continue with that work. And we also tried more broadly on several subjects, organize meetings, seminars in Barcelona, Dublin, Arad. We have an open doors policy, meaning that if we have an event, we publish it on our website, we try to advertise it broadly, everybody's welcome. We try to, in this way, we try to involve people in the European political process. We have a focus as well on families as Europe's future, so does the European Union. And one of our publications is publication on fair taxation and families. We are preparing a family policy manifesto, and we had conferences on this issue in Warsaw, and we will have one in Strasbourg. My apologies for the wrong spelling of the city name. We believe that, in the end, Europe is not about its structures, but about its people. And these people are, in our view, relational beings that are looking for a Europe that they can relate to, and to which becomes, in this way, their Europe of solidarity. And we believe that these values will help and underpin the process of building this Europe of solidarity. And we look forward to continue to work to support our European Party with our ideas. We disseminate, of course, our publications to the member parties of the ECPM, of course, and we also always invite all members of the ECPM to our conferences, etc. We are present. We organize our annual events as close to the ECPM annual events as possible. In this way, we try to connect as much as we can our ideas to the member parties of the European Christian political movement. And as I said, we continue to do this work. We try to support our European party, but first and foremost, we try to serve the people of Europe by providing a vision for a relational Europe, for a Europe of the future. Thank you for listening to this.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Jong. Now give the floor to the fourth speaker, Felicita Medved, President of the European Liberal Forum. You have the floor.
I would like to express a good morning to all the participants. I'm also very happy that students are here and extend my thanks to the organizer of this conference, the European University Institute, and also to the Committee for Constitutional Affairs hosting this event. I will speak about the European Liberal Forum. I will tell a little bit about our legal status, our structures, how we work, what have we done so far, and what we intend to do in future. So the European Liberal Forum is a non-profit organization under Belgian law. We are the political foundation of the ALDE Party, Alliance for Liberals and Democrats for Europe. Considering our structures, we have the Board of Directors, which is elected by the General Assembly, consisting of the representatives of our member organizations. In the autumn of 2012, a new board was elected at the General Assembly. Currently, it's composed by myself as a president. Then we have a State Minister, Dr. Jinger Martens, who is a vice president from Germany. Roel Martens, our treasurer, comes from the Netherlands. Andreas Bergström from Sweden. And Giulio Ercolesi is our board member from Italy. Unfortunately, our vice president is not in the picture because he's always so difficult to catch. Our organizations consists of 35 member organizations, now in almost all countries of the European Union, and we are also very happy to recently have a new member from France. And so far, of course, we do not have yet members from the countries outside the EU, but we do implement some of our projects in the European neighborhood as well as in the candidate countries. How do we work? Our main method or approach to our work we would call a subsidiary approach. And this means that probably we ought to distinguish our rather small and still modest association or political foundations from other larger foundations in its commitment to a wholly subsidiary approach to its work. So instead of entertaining a large secretariat in Brussels, we rely on benefits and know-how which exists throughout the EU and in our member organizations. In this way, ELF is also making sure that our message stays close to the European citizen. On a day-to-day basis, we operate along a hub-and-spoke system, which means that the Secretariat in Brussels takes the role of a hub channeling the information between the different members and liberal stakeholders in Brussels and elsewhere. So in a way, it is a very flexible model which allows us to be a dynamic organization encouraging both research as well as capacity building on issues of European interest. Now, in this context, I would like that you draw attention to the figure on this slide. And as you can see, member organizations make out largest cog in this so-called machinery. But in an important cogs are also various key liberal organizations, especially those of the ALDE party and groups in the European Parliament, in the Committee of Regions, as well as Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So the catalyst for a liberal European focus, which is also an important element of how we work, is that we rely on our member organizations because they are the custodians of the knowledge in this network. Nevertheless, ELF is not a kind of uncoordinated group of think tanks, institutes and political foundations, but rather a purposeful foundation standing with the ways of its member organizations and with a vision for Europe and European public policy issues. So promoting research and capacity building means that we are not bound only to research, but that we have, in fact, a two-pronged mission of contributing to European public policy issues and to engage and inform the European citizen. And for this reason, our activities are a heterogeneous mix consisting of capacity building, teaching young, engaged liberals and liberal-minded people about the benefits of European integration and about liberal principles in a European context. So, for example, we did capacity building also outside the EU in the Western Balkans last year. And we also have what we would call pure research projects. Let's say last year we have done a project on national Roma integration strategies in Central and Southeastern Europe, which resulted in policy recommendations which we are going to present here in the European Parliament on the International Roma Day on 8th of April this year. Now, the ELF I think I probably already explained this, but we also have formulated some multi-annual focus clusters. Particularly, we have now running two multi-annual projects. One is called New Concepts for Migration and Integration, and the other, How to Combat Nationalism and Populism. Now, within the first project, we already published a few publications that you can see on our website, or maybe you can also pick them up somewhere here. One is from our Swedish member, Forest, Labour Migration, What is it in for us? So it is an anthology which gathers European labour market enlargement and experiences according to this enlargement. Then we have one on international migration and integration of immigrants in Europe and Slovakia. The ongoing project will result in a publication of migration in policy and migration in the new member states of the EU. Then another project within this work concerns specifically liberal answers to modern migration and integration issues in Western Europe, also considering what is happening to the liberal values like freedom of movement, which are in some countries of Western Europe felt as to be under threat. Then our Romanian member organization is working on the social and economic impact of migration, particularly intra-EU migration, which is also a high topical issue just in these days. Then in the second cluster, we had already, as I mentioned before, training events, training sessions. How could young liberals in Western Balkans oppose populism by promoting rule of law, basic human rights, and 4 EU freedoms as these core liberal values of the European projects. Similar events are taking place also in, for example, Lithuania by our Open Society member organizations, which this will also result in a publication. Then we are talking about political apathy and populism across Europe. We also have projects within this framework in Catalonia. Then our project Polska member organization is also working on liberal strategy against nationalism, which will result in policy recommendations in this running year. But what is also important that we as the board of directors can by ourselves or on the initiatives of our secretariat in Brussels also organize certain events or initiate certain research. And a good example of such an initiative is the European Values Series events that ELF plans to implement this year. And for example, we took some of the issues and we tried to place them in some places where we think they are particularly important, but not only there, like the media. On the International Media Day, it will take place in Budapest. Then corruption, Sofia, pluralistic government in Minsk, freedom of movement, uncovering the benefits of 4 freedoms in Zagreb as Croatia is approaching the European Union. So we believe that since our establishment 5 years ago, we have come a long way, not only in building the necessary structure to fulfill our mission and our responsibilities vis-à-vis the European Parliament, but and this was probably what we had to do in this initiating 5 years. But 2 years ago, we decided at the General Assembly that after these 5 years, we need a kind of evaluation of our work. And we had external evaluation done in year 10-11. And after this, we set up a working group on this evaluation and how their recommendations should be included. So we redesigned the membership admission process, improved selection process, improved project implementation process, and also to strengthen our European liberal dimension, to put more focus on research and the continuity of our projects. So I believe I have to stop here. Anyway, I believe we are an organization on the right path, and if you need more information, you can look at our secretariat. You can become a member of our Facebook page, and also we hope to coordinate with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Grazie molto.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you as well for understanding the timing constraints we have and my request. We now move to Anya Skrupček, Senior Research Fellow at the Foundation for European Progressive Studies.
Thank you very much. The European University Institute as also the observatory for this invitation. It's absolutely exciting to be here, and I tell you why. Because in the 8 years that I've spent in Brussels, I've seen the discussions leading to creation of the foundation, then I've been dreaming of having a job at the foundations when it was created. And I have been there for the last almost 5 years, helping to shape this very crucial stage. So I'm very passionate and I'm very honored that I can be here today and perhaps add up to the long list of achievements that my honourable colleagues from the other foundations have already presented, as much as the European Union has already benefited from the respective work of the different foundations. So let me run you through a few points that I have brought along. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm afraid that it usually distracts me from talking, and I very much believe also from the foundations in this personal contact, so I will try to entertain you anyway with a speech. I think that if you look at the last 5 years, because that was the question of the observatory, how you assess the last 5 years of the foundations, I think that 3 words come to my mind to begin with. The first one is concept of the foundations, and if you look at the presentations given already before, you see that we have a bit of a different conceptualizations within the legal framework given, and I think that that's why the diversity in between the different presentations, it was so exciting, especially for me being the 5th speaker and challenging you pretty much at the last of the list. The second thing is a question of constructing. You do have the legal framework, you do have financial resources, we always say, and I think all the colleagues will share that, never enough, but you have some financial resources. How do you construct a valuable project on the basis of that? And the last thing is a question of consolidation, because if you look at the national members, and I think different colleagues mentioned that as well, how do you consolidate it into a sort of a pan-European agenda that can provide alternative and can make a difference? So I would say, especially within our network, we have 48 member organizations, foundations member organizations. The first question was how to preserve pluralism by putting together a European think tank. It is difficult because if you look at our membership, we have organizations that are, for example, 127 years old, like Fabian Society, and are very much of an intellectual think tank-based organization as a tradition. But we also have organizations that are much more similar to, for example, development NGOs, looking at our Swedish member like Olof Palme Center. It's also a question of then how to consolidate those agendas and give an added value as a European progressive think tank. I think that there are therefore 3 challenges that one could say that any think tank on the European level was thinking. It's not to become the common denominator, the lowest common denominator that's always so much criticized on the European level, but how to preserve diversity and enable that to perhaps come together into a certain new school of thought, to provide an alternative on the European level, and how to bridge the gap between the citizens and the European Union, so to make them be part of this democracy deliberative process that we've been so much saying that has been suffering in the last years. I think that paradoxically, and that's important to underline, and many of my colleagues referred to the question of economy and the crisis, the establishment of political foundation is also correlated with the hit of the most profound global crisis that had obviously its impact on the European level, which dictated and predictated in certain ways all of our agendas in the last years. The question how you understand the crisis, how you assess, how you go out of the crisis, but that was precisely one of the new openings that I think all the foundations, including ours, jumped on, how you give the new answers, how you give alternatives. The second thing that is important is because of the crisis and the crisis of the EU, also it has been somehow easier for us to link the strengthening of the European public sphere, which is also part of our challenge, with the national level. If you look at the elections of the last year, the European Union is much more present in terms of the national context and national elections, which means that bringing the European level and having an interest on the national level is somehow the two-way highway. And the last but not least, I mean, of course, we would from the foundations very much say that we are the ones crucially contributing to the change of the Meinungsklima, if you want. But the Lisbon Treaty, of course, provides more elements, such as citizens' initiative, such as possibility of campaigning, which altogether, if they really are brought and coherently put together, really can emphasize what we are all at service of, politicization and Europeanization of the national politics. I think that this is the most exciting junction to be at in that sense, to be on the edge of the politics, academia and participation, all of them being under the question mark, how you proceed with that, how you construct alternative, how you emancipate the choice. So having given all these big words, how do we do that? In FEPS we have 4 pillars of research, and please forgive me, I will very much go on to the research. If you are interested in terms of our bodies and organizational skeleton, I would invite you to the website. But in terms of 4 pillars that we have, it's next left, which is the pillar that deals with the issues of social democracy and the future of the movement, ideological development, values, the question of how we organize ourselves as the progressive movement. The second issue, European society, which is what sort of Europe for what sort of society we as progressive would like to envisage. The third one, is the question of economy. We very much had very much of a discussion starting from the crisis, what sort of alternative economy, what sort of economy we would envisage, what sort of economic governance. And last but not least, the question of international, because in FEPS we do not believe that being a European foundation is to be focused only on Europe exclusively. We believe as Europe, being the also bridge and Europe's role in the world, is playing a very important role in our agenda. There are 3, let's say, lines that I would like to run you through to give you a bit of a sense of an organization that I'm absolutely passionate for, and I could talk much longer than 12 minutes, but I understand that as for anybody else, talking about your own organization is always the most fascinating one, so I will stick to the 12 minutes. The first one is I want to talk to you about the research. The second one, I want to talk to you about the activities that are enabling the debate. And the third one, I would like to talk to you about the idea of Europe and revitalization of idea of Europe. And I hope to finish in 6 minutes precisely with giving you some of my thoughts concerning what sort of challenges we have for the next 5 years. Because it's nice to talk about the past, but it's much nicer to create the future. In terms of research, I think that for any think tank that starts on the European level, there's this ambitious task of creating a new European school of thought, a sort of a reference point that the other people with the movement can refer to. So go beyond the comparative, go beyond trying to reach compromises like within the party, but actually liberate possibilities of exchange and looking what sort of a common vision for Europe we could have. The first one was, of course, and most profound question was the question of economy and crisis. And here we have been looking at different activities. One of the prominent ones were, for example, the exchanges with Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate. But we also have made a series of the national roundtables, bringing together economists on the national level that would perhaps not always go to the European-based conference, but would be very keen in terms of knowing what sort of trends there are on the European level and what sort of translation it has for the national level. Of course, as for socialists, one of the very prominent debates that we have is the future of the social Europe. We all know that at the moment in the post-crisis era, Europe is facing difficult political choices. There are profound questions concerning the governance. There are profound questions concerning the European social model. You've heard us in our political family being very much defending on the European social model and putting that in forward. But we do preoccupy ourselves with a question, what sort of a social model, what sort of welfare, what does it mean for a changed society? And those were one of the few very profound questions that we put ourselves as a research. The second thing in the research, which already some colleagues mentioned, but I would like to highlight, is that European think tank gives you a possibility to take the issues that perhaps are the side issues for the national think tanks and make them deliberated on the European level. Example of that is the group that we established on the question of democracy and Euro-democracy and Euro-partisanship. For the national parties, that's perhaps something that is very nice in Brussels, and in Brussels that works very well to discuss about the Euro-partisanship, but not always it is the desire to discuss on the national level. For us, it has been a very prominent thing, and we are quite proud to actually have come with the first study concerning what sort of an impact the institution of top candidate would have on democracy, not only on our political family, but how that could change the interrelations within the institutional system. Another thing is a question of developing methodology, because having the resources that we have, it's possible to bring the academics from the different countries to unite them within the research community and to look at the possible convergence between the European studies and the studies that are being concluded on the national levels. We have a number of tools, and you will have a long list of activities, and I'm not planning to compete with my SES colleague in terms of numbers. But of course, as also their foundations, we have the working group, focus group, the bigger conferences, the peer reviews. But next to that, we also try to open up. We try to host the activities at the different universities, our exchanges with for example, Oxford, but also local university here in Brussels, the Madrid University are examples of that. But we also try to reach out to the younger generation. I mean, usually when you come to the academic conferences, you get a lot of people in pretty much the same age already established and giving their expertise. We have established a group that is called FEB's Young Academics Network, which is precisely to reach out to the people who already started their academic career and are very willing to contribute to the development of the European level. In terms of the research, I think that, and my colleagues can also probably ally with that, it's a question of establishing a credibility as a think tank, as a European think tank, that there is something more than just being an enabler, but there is an ambition to have a more long-term vision, as much as also having more concrete policy proposals. And that leads me to another point, which is the question of the debate. When research is very often perceived as from the political think tank as sort of fusion cuisine, which is having very sophisticated ingredients, as very often in politics, people would actually prefer a sort of a microwave dish that you put somewhere, it's cooked and it's there, you have a solution. I think, it's very difficult to balance in between one and another, between becoming too theoretical and still keep this privilege of being the enabler of the discussion between the citizens and the European Union. Which is why we've invested a lot in terms of the capacity building. My colleagues from the Liberal Forum especially was underlining the capacity building, and we've been doing that both within the European partisan movement, but also for the countries that are still to access. For example, Balkan project is very prominent. We've been trying to make a dialogue. We socialists usually think about ourselves as a movement, so we very much try to engage with the initiatives such as World Social Forum, such as the popular movement. I mean, I'm very surprised that nobody has mentioned Indignados. We've been talking about democracy, but nobody has mentioned those movements. So we've been trying also to anticipate on the relations with those maybe unusual movements, but we also, of course, go into the discussions such as gender projects as such. How we bring it up, of course, it's not only about talking. Talking is very good, especially in Brussels, and I think we've spent 2 hours right now proving that as well. But we, of course, have a lot of publications. I didn't mention them by research, but I will mention that now. It's a question of publications being seen as both the result and parenthesis of everything that we do, but also the question of involvement and multiplication. We have the book series, both in terms of the next left, but also the enlargement, austerity, the economic book series. But we also have 2 magazines. One is popular, which is called Fresh Thinking, and another one, which is Queries, which is more of a scientific one. I think that I was planning to talk about Europe, and as always, in the case of Europe, there is no time to talk about Europe. So I think that I've given you a bit of an idea of what we do in both research, schooling, training, and debates. I think that all fits very much also in terms of strengthening the partisanship, because we are trying to find this sense of profound difference. And if I was thinking about 3 challenges, I said 3 things about FEBs in terms of concept, consolidation, and communication. Now I would like to give you the 3 challenges. And I think that the first challenge is to start framing a debate on the European level. We are all enablers. We are trying to search for synergies in between our national members and the European level. But I think it's also time to have the debates framed from the European level about the future of Europe. And I think that that's an important thing for the European organizations. The second thing is the question of creating perhaps new evaluation criteria of also the European politics. European politics is very often seen as this very technocratic, and you see my struggle between the research and the debates, how you translate it and how you do it, how you establish the new participation criteria and possibilities. And the last one, I think that you've been seated here, and I think that by any of my esteemed colleagues speaking, unless you have obviously very strong political views, you could have perhaps subscribed to any of our organizations as a very exciting project. But I think what would be really exciting for you to hear is how we differentiate among each other. Let it be values, let it be politics, let it be the way of thinking, let it be the way of constructing. And those cleavages, if we manage to find them in between the different ideas that we put forward, in a tangible manner, I suppose would make the European politics much more passionate, much more exciting, and us much more assuming the responsibility of enhancement of the European public sphere. I am, as always, socialist, very outspoken and behind the time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie. Thank you very much, Mrs. Skrupczyk. Now, Lena Gewessler has the floor. She is the director of the Green European Foundation.
My name is Leonore Gewessler. I'm the director of the Green European Foundation. I'd like to introduce next to me also Claude Weinberg, our Secretary General. For a change, will both be available in the discussion afterwards also for comments. But before I start with our input, which followed largely the questions which were posed to us also, I'd like to both thank the organizers and the AFCO Committee as hosts very warmly for the occasion to present our work and to show you also the differences and the wide variety that is between the foundation. I can assure you I'm just as passionate about this work as the speaker before me, so I'm very happy also to see the big interest in the audience for this issue. I will structure the presentation around 3 points. The first set of questions was around the role of the foundation, where I will start from our working methods and link it to concrete projects. The second was the question of network, actor of its own right, and the third is a bit of an outlook what we want to do in the next 2, I think, quite crucial years, 2013, 2014. For JEF, which is the 4th biggest foundation at the European level, we've seen a period of sustained growth in the last years, kick-started by the good election results of the European Greens. It was a building exercise, but an exercise that has enabled us to expand both our projects, our activities, but also our ambitions with these projects. JEF currently has representatives of 16 green national foundations in its networks, as well as representatives from the party and the parliamentary group, which help us to build this endeavor at the European level. Not wanting to repeat what already Tommy Hutanen from CES said very eloquently on the regulation, I would nevertheless want to point to 3 factors which I think are key to understanding the way we understand our work, which are based in the regulation. The first one is that we very much support the underlying reasoning that what is really lacking and what we really have to work for is this establishment of a European sphere of debate. The second one is obviously the focus on Europe, because if there is an added value in the European Foundation, that's there. And the third one is this question of being both an own actor and a network of actors, which I will come back to afterwards. This led to a mission statement that for JEF very much focused on Europeanizing the debate and the training, the seminars, the activities within our own political family, but we always, as many of the colleagues mentioned before, also always try to reach also beyond our immediate political family with the aim to involve and to enable people to take part in this European debate. There's maybe 2 points to pick up from where Anja left also that are a bit different towards the other foundations. In our case, there were 2 strategic decisions in the beginning. The one is not to set up JEF in Brussels as a classical think tank. I think you can see also differentiation between the bigger and maybe the little bit smaller foundation in this approach. But a decentralized, an actor based on decentralized activities, more a knowledge broker, or in Brussels you call it now a think-do tank, but not a classical think tank. And the second part is that we very explicitly decided not to focus on Brussels and the Brussels audience. So describing our work, I would use 4 adjectives. We work at the same time decentralized and transnational, very focused and synergetic. And I will try to explain what I mean with that. Decentralized, just picking up from what everybody else also said, The idea of JEF was to bring the European debate to the national debate, not so much to feed the Brussels debate. So when in 2012 we hosted 47 events, only 2 of those took place in Brussels. The rest of the events took place in 17 EU and accession countries. In terms of reach, we focus very much on the EU with the means we have, so we don't have this global ambition that was just cited before. The key project example, because you always wanted to hear, okay, this is what you want to do, how do you do that? The key project example could be our debates on the future of Europe. We focused our work last year very much on the question of the economic and the democratic future of the European Union, and we did that by creating a European framework for these debates, but having them implemented in 10 countries, from Finland to Spain to Poland in the last year. The second adjective I used is transnational. So working decentralized doesn't mean to give up on the key quality of transnationality in our work. We invest very strongly in making our events European, both in the topic but also in the participation. So whether this event is in Bulgaria or in Spain, it always has European voices to it. And the key project example for that could be our series of transnational seminars. We just last weekend had a seminar with 35 people from 21 countries on the social consequences of the current financial crisis, trying to map what could be a vision of a green social Europe, what could be the key proposals there. And this debate was very heated, I can reassure you, but it also made Europe present as much in the way of the debate as in the content of the debate. And I think this is, in terms of approach, I think crucial also for the European foundations. The second pair of adjectives that I used was focused and synergetic. Focus, also I have to point to the fact that our mission, the mission that is given to us by the regulation is of a magnitude, helping to create a European sphere of debate. I cannot offer 10 staff, but 4.5 staff. So the task is an enormous one, which leads inevitably to having to focus. We cannot, it's clear with the limited means, we cannot be relevant in all the debates. So for JEF, there was a strategic decision to focus on some key issues, key debates that are relevant for our own political family, but also beyond, instead of trying to be a little bit everywhere. So you will see a lot of our work being focused on the questions of democracy, economy, the economic future, ways out of the crisis, and energy questions, renewable energy questions. In project terms, 2 examples. One, the European Citizens Initiative, where we've published for a variety of target groups, from a more theoretical work to trying to enable people to actually use this instrument, understanding how you really very practically do it in order to make this also to be one actor that tries to help a little bit making this a success. The other one is our work on populism, which we started with a book publication, but in the meantime presented all over Europe. So focused, tough choices to make, I think, for all the foundations. On the other hand, trying to create synergies. However overused this term might be, I think for all of us this is key. We as my colleague from ELF mentioned it, we work very much with the knowledge that's already present in our network of member foundations, in civil society, in academia, and trying to bring this into the debate on the one hand. On the other hand, it also means within our role within the Green family, synergy is a really important word or headline for that. We try not to double existing efforts, but really try to complement and underpin the work of the other actors. For example, we work with we work more with academia, civil society. We have a view on the longer term perspective, and examples like that. Want to point to a last project example in this regard. That's our online journal, Green European Journal, which is conceived as a network of journal of foundation actors, which builds on what is already there nationally, to bring it together in an English-speaking online journal, which then, in the result, is also available for republication, again, in the journals that are involved in it. So the idea that what we need is a place for national public spheres to actually exchange and engage in a debate and to make these debates travel borders, I think this was one of the key starting points for this project, with which we hope to make one contribution to this idea of establishing a European sphere of debate. The question on whether foundations are entities of their own right or networks. I think in all of the presentation you heard that we very much build on our networks, and this is also the case in JEF. We've managed to, in the last 5 years, in this building exercise, really to establish ourselves with our profile as an actor, with our projects and with our issues that we cover. On the other hand, much of our work wouldn't be possible without the network of national foundations which support our work, which relay the message, which give us input to cater and to also adapt our work to the national contexts in which we are going to have the debate. So I think the benefits of working inclusively and as a network are clear. It's not an either-or. It's already in the regulation that it's a bit of both. And I think it's simply recognizing also the fact that in the setup and in the financial means of foundations, much of the strength at the moment lies in the network. And I think this network building that we all managed to do is crucial, should be seen as a success also of our work in the last years, because it's not only built Europe is not only built top-down, but very much on this horizontal exchange that we managed to give a platform, I think, on the European level. And there's a last point. What we want to do in the near future, I think for all of us, the discussion on the future of the European Union in democratic terms, in economic terms, ways out of the crisis has been key, has played a big part in our work. Also for Jeff, the idea of Europe is at the crossroads and we need a room for debate has been very prominent, against the backdrop of rising Euroscepticism both on the left and on the right. So much of the tensions, of the fundamental tensions come back to the fore. How much solidarity, we heard it, how much competitiveness, how much community, how much flexibility, a Europe of free trade or a united people of Europe. And we think that we need to give these discussions room also. And I think the foundations as actors can be spaces inside their political families, but also with regards to the European citizens to actually be a forum also for these fundamental debates. This is a role that we think is worth strengthening, that the European Commission and the things also from our side for all the work you all involved in this current revision of the regulation, that this revision of the regulation is trying to strengthen also with the European status for foundation, and we very much think this is a good step and will enable us all to build on the last 5 years to make an even more valuable contribution in the next 5 and more to come. Thanks a lot.
Grazie a lei. Siamo arrivati.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the 7th speaker, Giulia Massotti, Project Manager of the Institute of European Democrats. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank on the behalf of the Institute of European Democrats, the organizers from the OPPR, and Professor Luciano Bardi and Enrico Calossi, and also the AFCO Committee for hosting this very interesting conference, which is an opportunity for us to meet and share our ideas on the role and contribution of the political foundation at the European level, and that's why I also want to thank my colleagues for their intervention. The Institute of European Democrats that I am representing today is one of the small foundations at the European level. It supports European integration, and it was established in September 2007, so it has participated to the whole process. of establishment and development of the European political foundation at the European level. I will try to cover in my contribution the points given us from the organizers. So I will start from what is the foundation role. I think that a good starting point for answering to this question is to look at the regulation of 2007 that has furnished the basis, the legal basis for the establishment and development of our foundations. We can make a threefold reasoning. So looking at, first of all, at the reasons behind this regulation. Second, to the regulation itself. And third, to how it was put into practice by the foundations. So we can see this regulation and so the basis for foundations' role within the framework of the debate on Europe that developed in the aftermath of the failure of the constitutional treaty. And then we have to look at the debate and the reflection on the role of European foundations as one piece of the mission and of the thinking towards the creation of a real and sound democracy at EU level. Which means that when thinking about this regulation, both academics and politicians thought that the European Union was lacking of a sound public sphere. And so European foundations were seen as key actors that could help to develop debate on European issues at European level. Of course, it was this debate and this reflection was based on national contribution, notably the German model, where foundations really contribute to the democratic infrastructure. And when at the European level they started to think about the role of foundation, they made this, it has been called by an academic, Dorota Dakowska, a constrained policy transfer, which is a case of lesson drawing from the national level to the European level. Of course, while making this lesson drawing, at the European level, the role of the foundations wasn't perceived in the same way. So it is clear in the regulation that there was the will of the legislators to link closely the role of the foundations to their to the political parties at the European level to which they are formally affiliated. So that's also remarkable in the regulation itself, where that it has been already quoted, so I won't now. Now, in order to answer to the following points, which are close linked to how the individual foundations interpret their role and through which kind of activities do they contribute. I would like to stress some important elements. First of all, we have to consider that we have to be very realistic about the contribution that each foundation can give, looking at the tasks that are conferred by EU legislation and the resources and the abilities of the foundations to really pursue these tasks. Secondly, we have to keep in mind that there is a big distinction between the biggest foundations and their ability to work as a network and the smallest foundation. And also that in these two different ways to work, it is also important to take into account the relation between the foundations and the political parties. That varies also according to the size of the foundation. So now, how the foundations have interpreted their role can be interesting in this regard to take into account what has been said by two academics that are here today, Gagatek and Vanek, who have stressed how the foundations can help to can complement the role of political parties in structuring this public sphere, this political debate. That is so. This is a way to say that political foundations could have interpreted their role in many different ways in order to contribute to the public debate. They could have stretched much more their direct interaction with the wider public, or they could have stressed more their actions complementing the reflection of the European political parties. I think that it is very difficult to make a general comment on this, because every single foundation tries to act in different ways and also to contribute in different, on different levels. So what I would like to say in this regard on this difference between the role of foundation as an actor that interacts directly with the wider public, or an actor that is more helping the political party to which it is affiliated, that I want to quote our president of the Institute of European Democrats, Jean-Claude Casanova, who said, les fondations politiques doivent avoir un rôle.
He said political foundations have to have a direct role with citizens and an indirect one with institutions. Effectiveness and morality of democracy requires best possible information to citizens and clear sight by governments, those two guaranteed by the action of disinterested elements such as political foundations who will give information to citizens and inform governments.
Foundations can contribute in two different ways, one direct and one more mediated. I'm afraid that I'm running out of time, and I would have liked to speak also about all the other points, but then I think I will have to stop here in order to allow also my colleague to intervene after me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the last speaker of Foundation Representations is Walter Bayer, Coordinator of Transform. Thank you. Exceptionally, I'd like to be able to address an international forum in my mother tongue, in German. Thank you for your invitation and for the very interesting contributions of previous speakers. Transform describes itself as a left-wing think tank affiliated to the Party of the European Left. So the first question is, what is a left-wing think tank, or what is the left in post-1990 terms? It's important to stress that Die Linke is broader than just being a political party. It's made up of social and trade union movements, of people in culture and intellectual life, and then part of a foundation such as Transform. Obviously, the idea of the left has to be seen separately from social democracy and from the Green movement. As we see it, we are left of those political groups. Putting it in positive terms, Party of the European Left and Transform is due to social justice, democracy, feminism and ecological democracy, and a lot of organisations operating under Transform describe this as a sort of red-stroke-green agenda. It also reflects a very discrepant element of the European left. People involved in the Social Forum, in the International Council of the World Social Forum as well. We are different from other political groups also through how we see emancipation. That's a basic point for us. And democracy overcoming the existing political and social power arrangement, and the changing of capitalism and capitalist structures. This is determinant for us calling ourselves Transform Europe, which was set up in 2001 as part of the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre. We're pleased to note that. To some extent, it's clear as part of our culture that we're based on internal communication as part of a broad pluralist left wing, marking its diversity not through seeing it as a weakness but a strength. Transform was set up by 6 organisations, and it's now up to 25 organisations in 18 countries. And they work together largely, and to some extent one can talk of integration between them. Transform organises non-EU groups as well, in Norway and individual Eastern European countries that are not or not yet EU members. As a speciality of Transform, you could
europäischen Linken bestanden hat.
Note that it came about before Die Linke as a political party and was involved in the shaping of its platform. Transform 2007 was the basis there, with Transform being counted as the foundations related to the Die Linke political party as a pluralist, autonomous left-wing structure involving different organizations. Not represented directly by Die Linke and other parties, and after 5 years of cooperation, what we can see is that Transform's mission as a foundation of the European left has assumed this role, and both elements are working together to cooperate, on the one hand because the political clout of Transform is increased through having party group affiliation, and because it can bring organisations to the political party that parties normally have a great deal of problem accessing. Transform's inner structure is very largely democratic. Members and observers meet every year at a general meeting, and every 2 years in a general assembly approving the annual programs, with a management board of 8 people from 8 different countries presiding. There's an office in Vienna with not many people working in it. The geographical location in Vienna does help us with some of our functions. As an element of integration in Europe by overcoming the East-West divide, and Transform here is a sort of gate to the East in the interest of the European left. Along with the European Left Party, the network organises a summer university, bringing together activists, intellectuals and politicians from about 30 countries once a year. Its mode of operations is largely based on discussion. All intellectuals like to talk. There was a period that left behind a very fragmented left, and we hope to create some area of common trust to develop a common political structure for the left wing in Europe. Depending on the effectiveness of political opinion forming. We have multilingual media. We've got a journal coming out twice a year in 4 languages, and a collection that comes out once a year in 5 languages. The website is quadrilingual, and we're preparing to expand to 6. Same thing with a newsletter in 4 languages going up to 6 and 7. In terms of the network's content, there are 2 major projects. One deals with the crisis of capitalism. We think the social disaster caused by austerity programs in European countries not only appalling in terms of politics and theory, because a lot of our academic colleagues from these different colleagues have had drastic cuts in their pay and pensions, and we are seeing the pressure on social state as a risk for democracy and integration in Europe, particularly through the increase in influence of very right-wing and neo-Nazi parties. And the second bit of long-term research is problems of left-wing strategy for the left in Europe. Transform Europe is seeing European integration as an important framework in terms of democracy to help the left to come together again, because reforming the left wing internationally will then take us beyond the existing impasse. The same problem, the main problem that we see for this development is the crisis and the jeopardy of European integration, and we think that this is our key feature. Finally, on our network's future prospects, for the time being we're finding ideal options that go far beyond our means. Over the last few months we've seen cooperation with social groupings. One has been mentioned. With trade unions will be increased, and there's another possible form of cooperation beyond the existing split, which is between the trade union and people involved in politics, and we're working there. Finally, there's an increasing number of academics working with our network, happy to do so, as part of a new European area that we are practically just calling academia, where with individual academics we're carrying out targeted research. So I've got mixed feelings here. I do have to say that the prospects for the left-wing network are fairly optimistic, rather more than those of European integration, which is faced with a lot of very complex challenges. Thank you for your attention, and I think I've spoken for exactly 12 minutes. Yes, you have. Almost total respect of speaking time. Thank you. This does leave us a little more time than we thought. You've been very well organised here, so thank you to the foundations for their work and for their discipline here. We can carry on now with some comments. First of all, by academics from universities, and then by points in a general debate to add to points that haven't been made. So I'll give the floor first of all to Professor Wojciech Gagatek, University of Warsaw, who has a doctorate in social research at the European University in Florence on political representation of political parties, comparative European politics and political parties in the European Union. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for having us here. Now, previous speakers already congratulated the organizers of AFCO Committee and OPPR for organizing this conference. Now, we also want to extend this gratitude from one particular point of view, namely that so far the European Parliament, and particularly the AFCO Committee, was interested in the activities of the foundations, but mainly from the legal perspective. This is natural, of course. We need to create some legal rules for these foundations to operate, but what was missing was precisely what we are discussing today, namely how political foundations interpret their different roles, despite the fact that they operate in the same environment. So thank you very much. I think this meeting actually made this contribution possible. And the reason, I think, why we have been invited here, I'm talking for myself and my colleague who sits on my left, Seven van Hecke, is that because we conducted a research project analyzing European political foundations. We have already published one paper on this topic and two are forthcoming. So what I try to do is that I'll try to put those interventions that we have heard today in the context and try to look for similarities and differences and also what actually difference these foundations make. One particular point from which I want to start is about, I think some speakers actually mentioned this, that the foundations are somewhere on the middle ground between politics and academia, research-oriented activities. But they are also in the middle ground as far as the expectations towards their functions are concerned. So on the one hand, we know that political foundations as such have a big role to build or help to create European public sphere, European civil society. On the other hand, there's a big role that they need to complement the activities of the Euro parties. And the question is how they try to find a compromise between these two aims. And in the literature on this topic, there is only a few people, one or two other papers that analyzes European political foundations. Some people see European political foundations as a means to attach greater legitimacy to the European institutions. However, my colleague, we rather see it as a function of the complementing the activities of the Euro parties, particularly from the very important point of view. That is, the Euro parties so far, before European political foundations were created, they were lacking enough resources to develop policy expertise. In other words, the policy agenda, the legislative functions were actually taken by the political groups in the parliament, but because Euro parties did not have enough resources, policy-seeking capabilities were lacking. So we thought that we could analyze it actually and ask what role foundations play towards actually building this ground for the policy-seeking capabilities of the Euro parties. The second point I want to make, and I think it was mentioned by Giulia Mazzotti, but that needs to be emphasized even more strongly, is that we have here a rather completely different amount of subsidies that European political foundations receive. All the speakers here have the same time in terms of speaking time, but the resources they have are completely different. Now, I won't get into the figures, of course, but the CES, I think, budget is about 4 million euros, whereas the budget of the European Christian Political Foundation amounts to slightly more than, I think, 165,000 euros. So the differences, the expectations are also different. They should be different. But there is one particular point, I think, which is also worth mentioning. So, do they make a difference, the foundations, towards the activities of the Euro parties? Yes. Why? Because if you remember that, for example, EPP, so the largest European political party now, employs about 28 people, whereas CES employs about, I think, 12 people, then we see the potential that the foundations can actually play. So we have, I think, a very important lesson to learn here, and as again, how particularly the foundations are complementing the activities of the parties. And we have seen slightly different, I think, opinions here. From our research, it came out that the two largest foundations, Center for European Studies and the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, are much closer with the respective Euro parties than all the other foundations. So that link is much more visible. I think the chairman of the CS actually made it here, in emphasizing how actually the close link between the EPP and the CS makes it better for them in terms of, for example, organizing events or assessing the decision makers. However, all the others, I would say, not smaller, but the remaining foundations emphasize this link between the party and the foundation in a much clearer way. So they rather tell that they try to feel independent in allowing and in carrying on with their own agenda. Of course, the link is clear. This is an ideological link, but at least from our research it came out that CS and FEPS are much more closer to the respective Euro parties than the other cases. And the third point which I want to make is about membership policy of the European political foundations. And again, here we came to a different conclusion. We've got examples like the CS where necessary condition for being a member of the CS is affiliation of the national foundation to one of the EPP member parties. But we've got also other cases like ELF, for example, where this condition is not so visible. What matters is rather ideological links, ideological affinity, rather than formal link of affiliation. But also there is another point which we also need to emphasize, is that except perhaps for CS, FEPS, and maybe for the third largest foundation for the ELF, smaller foundations face a problem that they do not have contact organization, partner organization in all the member states. So for that reason, their activities must be limited. However, what we have seen is that they try to be active even in those countries, in those member states where they do not have members. In other words, they try to build a ground for the liberal, socialist, all ideological activities of their own party family, even if in those countries where their respective parties lack partners. I think that is a very important to emphasize. And the last point is particularly important for us from the point of view of the Giannakou report, as I said before, is the question of how political this foundation should be. And the problem here, which we analyze in greater depth in the paper, is that not only we have different expectations at the European level, but we also have different traditions in the member states as far as the role of the foundation is concerned. In some countries where foundations exist, the link between the foundation and party is very close, whereas in others they remain rather independent. And this obviously influences the vision of the how the foundations at the European level should function. Thank you very much. I'll now give the floor, if I can, to my colleague.
Grazie, senz'altro il suo collega.
Thank you. Well, definitely, I'll give the floor to Stephen van Acker, who is from Leuven University. He's been working with you. He's been dealing with comparative politics in the European Union and its political foundations. So you have the floor.
Thank you to the AFCO team and also the UDO team for organizing this conference. It's an honor to be here, but it's not an honor to be the last in a long row. So I will be rather short, and despite being an academic and being addicted to PowerPoint, just a few bullet points to share with you. Let me first start with a rather general comment and repeat what we have in common here today. I think this is, first of all, research being done by political foundations and also by universities in Florence, Pisa, Warsaw, or Leuven. But of course also the central belief, that Europe is not only about regulations, about different political programs, but it's also about ideas, politics. And in that way, it cannot be a coincidence that the word politics is central in the emblem of the conference poster. I have seen this morning, and we also published about it, a plurality of ideological concepts, different visions, policy preferences, strategic choices here among this round table, even a plurality in terms of the ways in which these foundations have been presented. But at the same time, of course, a high degree of uniformity in terms of what these European political foundations do. They all publish, they all organize activities, they are more or less organized in the same way, despite the fact most of them, not all, but most are international non-profit organizations under Belgian law, despite the fact that there is so far no single European statute, neither for parties, neither for European political foundations. And in that regard, I think the Giannakou report is rather disappointing, because in that way there will be not much progress to be expected in the coming years. We also know, but let me repeat this, that the development of European political foundations is just one recent phenomenon among many others. Let's think about the way in which Europarties started much more than before to organize themselves in the run-up to the European Council meetings, that they also started much more than before to organize themselves in the run-up to the Council of Ministers meeting. Very interesting developments, I think. And they also started to think about selection procedures in order to have their candidates to become President of the European Commission in the run-up to the 2014 elections. Of course, these are not totally new phenomena. They have already a history. But I think, indeed, European political foundations is something new, and it's relatively young. Only 5 years is not much, even not in European integration history. At the same time, I think the development is spectacular. First of all, in terms of numbers and money. Of course, these numbers are relatively low if you compare them with figures at the national level or with the overall EU budget, but they are rather high if we know that it took so long for European political parties to have money out of the EU budget. Then a couple of years later, half of that budget was already ready to be spent by European political foundations. I think this is really surprising. It's also a spectacular development in the way because one could also see the development of European political foundations to be ahead of the Euro parties, because what makes them really specific and what they do much more than their Euro parties is to get involved with equal players at the national level. One cannot speak about the activities and the publications of European political foundations without taking into account their members' different national political foundations, essential for the dissemination of their ideas. So in that way, we know, and the development of European political foundations prove it, that the EU is not only about EU institutions, it is also about the member states. Political foundations do a lot, and perhaps they would like to do more, but at the end of the day, we should also take into account that first of all we need new rules, or the rules should be changed. Mijn Leuvense studenten zouden het intussen goed moeten weten. We first of all need new rules and new changes in these rules in order to really broaden the scope of activities of these Euro political foundations. We know there is a kind of institutional fatigue, and perhaps not much less can be expected, first of all from the Giannakou report, and then perhaps from the convention, the new treaty revision after the elections in 2014. It's a pity, I know, but I would also say that European political foundations should not take this as a reason not to be prepared for a future that is still to come. More about this, of course, in our publications. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Allora...
Thank you. We still have a fair amount of time, as I said, so I'd like to throw the floor open. Perhaps, if you agree, we can do it as follows. As a lot of you might have comments to make, but there's little time, perhaps each of the representatives of foundations could have an extra 5 minutes so that they can add points to what they've said and then react to anything coming up from the other presentations and from the academics, so that we get some further material that can be summarized by Professor Bardi afterwards. Then if I can simply ask who would like to start, there's not a problem in terms of order, so I'll give the floor to Mr. Macias, who is the first speaker.
Gracias.
Thank you. Well, given that the floor was open, I thought I'd take the opportunity. Thank you for giving us another chance. And I just have a few remarks to make in terms of the conclusions we've just heard, because I think they really highlight a few key salient points. In terms of the other presentations we've heard, particularly what the representative Transform was saying, I think in terms of the need to deepen democracy and emancipate our society, I think the foundations play a critical role. And certainly our aim is to try to broaden some of the concepts and build on and complement the traditions we have. I think what we've seen over recent years really compels us to do this. There's a Spanish comic, El Roto, who recently said in a comic that it's sometimes difficult to distinguish right from left. However, it was clear that there was still top and bottom. And I think that really is one of the points we need to focus on when we're trying to overhaul our societies, particularly in terms, as I said, in trying to guarantee that democracy has deep roots and creates a level playing field for citizens. I think this is one of the underlying basic goals of the Moritz Kopita Centre, to really deepen democracy and to ensure that the collective rights of people are a key plank of democracy, and that there is full recognition of these collective rights. If we don't have that, then democracy is not truly democracy. Now, in terms of what's been said, I think one of the key issues for political foundations in Europe is about trying to create a European space for debate, forum for debate, because you don't really have this European public opinion as such. That's something we notice in our work, and I think that's something we really need to focus our efforts on. Looking at our experience in the Moritz Kopita Centre, I think looking at the social foundations of the parties that are represented through their foundations, I think through the social foundations, through the grassroots, we are trying to ensure that the European debate is really hitting home much more than it was. I think a political foundation at European level is positive. It ensures that our various nations, regions, states get this idea of a European dimension. Now, it's very useful to hear the experiences today, hearing about publications, getting a sense of synergies that exist. And I just wonder why there hasn't really been much exchange between the foundations. I wonder if that's something to explore. Perhaps we could concert our efforts to promote debate at the European level and to reflect the various points of views that exist. I think that's something that we might wish to look at. Because it's difficult. This is something we experience too. But I think we're getting there. Prioritising the things that bring us together rather than those that pull us apart. So not really have local activities with a European umbrella, but actually have joint activities. I think that should be a focus. On the points that have been raised, let me say very briefly, I think there should be a clear ideological link to the political parties, but respect the autonomy of the foundations. There are rules in politics. They're often very complicated. And I think we're on the same wavelength here. It may be that we're similar in our outlook, but the pressure of party politics can occasionally be contradictory to the long-term work of foundations. We are not working to election deadlines or to public controversies. We're not necessarily dealing with those things that are very much on the current political agenda because they actually rather distort the long-term outlook. Then finally, what I'd say is that all those issues that we've highlighted as being important require appropriate funding, appropriate basic minimum funding. Otherwise, everything remains just nice words. Now, we've, of course, got different sizes in terms of foundations, but we need to be able to commission studies, produce publications. We need to guarantee that we preserve ideological pluralism. And if we're going to do that, then we need some minimum level of financing. I think that's important to underscore. Thank you very much.
Allora, vuole intervenire il signor Tomi.
Thank you. Mr. Uttanan.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 short concrete points and one challenge to respond what our two academic guests have said and also referring to discussion. I totally agree. I think the logic with the European Foundation vis-à-vis the parties is the same than international level. International level, the political party is running its daily operations. The news comes out, you need to respond in preference yesterday. The space and the frequency is extremely small. the role of the foundation is first of all have the long-term thinking, and for at least us, for the CES, to maintain the ideas, the vision, and the ideological aspect of the politics. I think that's one of the biggest contributions that the foundations can give. So in that I totally agree. Second point. The starting point for the political foundation, at least for the EPP, it didn't start as a theoretical concept. It started from practical reality. The EPP, before foundation, was trying to build policies, form policies. When it had an idea, it didn't really have no one to talk to, because in the national level, the political party, it has its close contact to civil society, university, different actors. Parties did not have that. EPP, in fact, was organizing, working as a political foundation. It was organizing political conferences with political institutes to have that contact, and that was the necessity where the CES was also created. However, listening to the presentations in our own experience, I speak about the foundation as an independent actor and think tank. But I think the conclusion, taking into account the resources we have, it is that the foundations are autonomous actors, but within the political family. I think that is the road, at least, which we will take, which poses many possibilities, but poses obviously also challenges. But the aim there is to use our other actors as the multipliers, which makes the role of the foundations. There's many roles, but one is the facilitator within the family, creation of cohesion, which brings to my final point, which is a challenge. Actually, when I speak about challenge, I'm thinking about the regulatory debate, what we are having. I'm thinking about this year's budget debate, which will be tough for us. And the problem here is the verification. Because if you, for example, compare to parties, they have the meetings, the pre-ministerial meetings, they have now European campaign, etc., etc. My claim is that all the European political foundations have contributed, have with our limited resources fulfilled our role. That can be clearly verified from the act, because when I discuss with my colleagues, there is much more demand from our political family and much more ideas we are able to respond. However, how to transform it in a very quantifiable bottom line, so to say, so we can, because in this discussion in the European Union, as our friend underlined within different words, it's a question of resources, it's a question of priorities, and in that discussion, the European political foundations have to find their place and also justify their existence.
Grazie.
Thank you. Elizabeth Gauthier from Transform had her hand up. Now, I don't know whether we're going to take her or finish with our speakers first. Okay, you have the floor. Speaking French, thank you for giving me the floor. I'm a member of the Transform Managing Board. I'm from France, and I just make a comment that I think is most interesting. I'm very interested in hearing people's reports, and almost all of them have dwelt on a very complex form of working between decentralization, i.e. the upgrading of the smaller member organizations, but also the need for integration and a sort of pooling of things. And I think that's most interesting, because this is an integration model that I think is very interesting, even though it varies from one organization to another. But it does show that once you're trying to get a system with European representatives at European level trying to integrate, clearly there is a need for some sort of model which isn't the same as for governments now, so this might be stirring things up a bit, but I think it's worth considering. It does mean that there are different forms of possible integration, and where you're thinking of getting people involved at European level, you might need a slightly different structure from what you normally have. And I would be keen to hear what conclusions people would draw from that, for instance, about the great challenge of European citizenship. Thank you. Mr. de Jong, then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to connect to what Mr. Gagatek pointed out, and this is the role foundations can have in compared to their European parties in exploring new ground and indeed making these connections beyond the European party. And because I think this is pointing to an important distinction foundations have in comparison to their party. I think it is very important when you speak about involving more people into the European democratic process, that there is indeed the possibility for foundations to work with national foundations, think tanks, that are not directly connected to a political party. I think this has two advantages. First of all, that smaller parties and foundations can indeed work at a pan-European level, as they are meant to be working. And secondly, it is good to have people involved, thinkers involved, who are experts involved, who are not always that connected to a specific political party. Because what we experienced, in my opinion at least, and what we also see now, and for example, the elections results of last night, which Professor Bardi so closely followed, that there is a need to connect beyond the current political structures, I think, in Europe. And in this regard, I fully agree with my esteemed colleague from Transform. And I think if the foundations indeed maintain this possibility and work with this, as they please, of course not for everybody, this is necessary, it should not be obligatory, but I think it's a very important tool to involve people in the European political process. And finally, I would fully agree with my colleague from the Centre for Maurits Coptier that foundations do need indeed a minimum level of funding. Otherwise, we would have get into a situation in which it is for smaller parties not interesting anymore or possible anymore to have a functioning foundation. And I think that we would not have that kind of distinction between bigger and smaller parties. So, but for us it is really important that with the resources that we have, it's not millions or something, we don't need that, but for us it's very important to be able to work with many different actors across the map within the European Union and outside the European Union. Because I think also, and I would like to close with this, the European debate, and we have experiences, for example, in conferences in Ukraine, it does not end at the borders of the European Union, but continues beyond that. And I think it's very important for foundations to have the possibility of this involvement in this field. And we, as ECPF, are continuing to explore these possibilities. Thank you.
Bene, grazie.
Thank you. Any other comments? Perhaps sticking to the same order as first round. Mrs. Medved, would you like to comment?
Yes. Well, I would like to thank my colleagues, representatives from various political foundations for their presentations. I think it was very enlightening also for us to meet, to see what we do, to see similarities, but perhaps also, I wouldn't say cleavages, but also our distinguished profiles that we already have among European public or that we try to achieve. If I could comment also on some of the findings of the ongoing research from academia on political foundations, and specifically the topics which have been here highlighted as a relationship between European political parties but also national political parties of the same ideological direction and the political foundations. I think I heard that in some way foundations are ahead of Euro parties. I would like to see that, and perhaps here it is, at this particular juncture in time, which is crucial, I think, after 5 years of their existence, for the future of political foundations, not only in the way of how they will define or how their statutory issues will be defined, including the new rules and financing, but also how they will find their role in defining European democratic political culture as the basis of the culture of democracy at a very important moment, I think, that European Union is now. Not only because of the certain crises, be it economic, social, even ethical in some parts, or moral. I think here they have a very important role to play. It has been said, particularly what concerns the European Liberal Forum, that we are trying to have and to accept members from various member states, and hopefully in future also in the European neighborhood, where we are already active, where perhaps national liberal parties do not exist, or they come to exist and they suddenly disappear. For us, as a political foundation, it is very important that we can reach out to the European citizens, also in these countries. So the link party, either on European level, yes, as an intellectual, not only ideological, but also intellectual base in a long term for policy making on different European public issues, but also at the level of member states. It is very important to keep alive the liberal idea, the liberal values, which in a way are also the fundamental values of the European Union. Now, secondly, this what mainly concerns the how would I say, our internal structures, or particularly in the case of the European Liberal Forum, it's to find in future the right balance between research, long-term programs that are research-focused and could link academia and the political world, and the other is capacity building, which again refers specifically to those parts of Europe where neither political foundations as a concept exist. I come from Slovenia. Yeah? There, a concept of a political foundation as such does not exist. Of course, our members are not only political foundations. Yeah? They are also think tanks, institutes, some, as it was said, NGOs developing certain ideas. So for us, it is important to strike this balance. And this, again, refers to another balance that we have to strike in future, and that is what we call centrality or decentralization of our methods of work or subsidiarity approach. So we are now on this way. Yes, initiative from our member organizations. Yeah? We always are very careful if some are what we would say too national, too local in the issues which are of course important for them. We try to bring this European dimension, not only in participation but also in the way they are thinking. And this of course needs, as it was pointed out, new rules. It needs continuous financing, yeah? And so hopefully we will contribute to the debate on the European Union, either if a new treaty, a new constitution, or new models will have to be searched in different political spheres. Yeah? And as it was mentioned before, because it is the European Citizen Year, I think it was worth to hear our colleague there. Maybe our role continues to be, whatever political orientation, to support active citizenship and to try to build in the future a common European demos, which, of course, as we know, does not exist. So I think my time has passed. Thank you for allowing me this debate.
Grazie a arricchire il nostro dibattito.
Thank you. That helps us a lot. Anja Skripek, I think, said that she had to wind up at 12 minutes, so she can add some points.
And thank you very much, esteemed colleague, for a most fascinating debate, showing a common responsibility for a mission that has been entrusted in us and different ways of trying to make the best out of available means and resources. I think the discussion has been most fascinating and definitely proves, as Steven van Hekke has already mentioned, not only a need but also the positive experience of the first 5 years of the existence of the European political foundations. I'd like to make 3 points. The first one I'd like to develop on the role of the national foundation. The second one, the question of the respect, the question of independence, because I think that CES and FAPS has been particularly addressed on the issue of the closeness to the party. And the third one that I would like to do is a question of responsibility in terms of political citizenship, and I'm very happy to follow the last speaker on the question of the activation and responsibility in that sense. I think in terms of role and this question of balance between the European and the national level is of course a question of how you build the European project. And here the foundations are not different than any other ways of constructing the European initiative. Obviously you have to have a mixture of both. You need to Europeanize the ideas that are coming from the lower bottom, but you also have to be able to put a European common ideological parenthesis among the different diverse ideas that are coming. And I think the question, the privilege that the foundations are having, and here they are very strong in, is a possibility of having this two-side highway that is giving a possibility of discovering perhaps new directions, but also having the transnational and transdisciplinary approach, which I think is very nice, bringing together both the research, politicians, practitioners, we've spoken about the civil society, and trying to see what the direction, what alternative is possible is, I think, very fascinating, and on that the political foundations have built very much, and I think that they here play a very important role also enhancing the European public sphere with the whole plea of diversity and the pluralism that they preserve in their way of working. And I think that here the freedom is very important. The question of the closeness of politics, I mean, knowing the research of Wojtek Gagatek and Steven van Hekke, I know that very much your comment refers to especially organizational arrangements and the statutory bodies. But I think that also what has been mentioned mentioned by the colleagues before and also in the previous round, is the question, what is the output of political foundations in terms of being avant-garde, their influence in terms of creating political vision, in terms of that vision being tangible and being taken over. And then here the question is perhaps more deeper, I would say, than just the organizational relations in terms of the statutory bodies. So I think that this evaluation criteria, I made a reference to that in my first presentation, I think they are very important in the sense of an output contributions, because you can have a lot of wonderful meetings, but the question is how much does it translate in restoring belief in Europe and in Europe going into a certain direction. This is what political foundations, I think, have a very important role to play. And the last thing is this question of responsibility, which I think the foundations, and we spoke about different constraints about the party politics. We know that the party politics, especially with the new ways of organizing society and new ways of engaging in politics, this whole way of what partisanship means and how you engage in politics needs to be very much rethought. And here I think that the foundations, and I think that the examples have been given in terms of different activities being shown, is that precisely the role of the foundation is very important in creating a bridge in between perhaps politics sensu stricto and the political debate that the society is very keen on engaging, even perhaps not directly engaging in the local sections. I mean, we talk academics, we talk journalists, we talk political minds, and I think that this question of a new and here also very challenging the European added value of political participation, intellectual political participation, is a very important contributions that the European political foundations are making to the different groups, the groups that perhaps not per se have been embraced before. And last thing, I mean, my colleagues made already a pledge concerning the ongoing discussion, and here I think that we've had very much of the cooperation in terms of the recent report and the question of sources available. I think that looking at the recent 10 years of the history of the European Union, we see the ongoing democratic crisis and so on, and here are foundations being entrusted with this massive responsibility of, creating political sphere, bringing people back to politics. So of course, I mean, the appetite grows with eating, so to say. We have been fulfilling the initial, perhaps more sceptical hopes that have been there, but in order to be able to develop, we need to be equipped with the resources that will enable us to match the ambitions that have been put in front of us. So that will be my final point.
Grazie a lei.
Thank you. Would the other people like to comment? Can I ask if Mrs. Gabesso would like to comment?
Comment, but as promised before, will be Claude Leinberg.
I'll comment, and I'll try to keep it short, and I'll pick up on two elements. The mission of the political foundation is to help create a European demos. So I accomplish my work when I'm asked. I've done my job when somebody defines himself as a European Democrat. Right? I smile when I manage to get a European Democrat to define himself as a green European Democrat. That's the amount of distance and the amount of closeness I want to my political family. If I don't have that, I become nolens volens, an instrument of the daily political dealing of the imminent necessities of the political party, which negates my reason to be. That's why we've always worked at that distance and this closeness. The second element, and I know some of the political families here will deny this, but the reality is that in all our political families at European level, we have people that go from Euroscepticism to a European national state. In all political families, we have that width of debate. So being anything else as in a place to discuss, to articulate the level of tolerance, the possibilities of what unites us and what divides us is paramount to our activities. And finally, if I'm supposed, as political foundation, to participate at the creation of a European demos, then I do need to be funded properly. And now, Mr. Van Dijk, it is true, we grew fast in terms of where we came from and where we are 5 years later. The reality is we have less than 0.03 cents per citizen per year. Now, that's the reality with which we operate. Pretending that we are correctly and sufficiently funded for the mission we've given, it's simply, even academically, not correct. That's it.
Grazie. Allora la signora Giulia.
Thank you. Mrs. Massotti to comment. If you would like to add points.
So, yes, I would like to add something, also following the other interventions. First of all, something about the importance of networks to overcome the barriers of limited resources, but not only this kind of barriers. Networks and this phenomenon of multipliers allow foundations to overcome the barrier of limited resources, but also the barrier of the topic, which is not the most appealing for European citizens. Still, networks are precious, but alone they are not sufficient. I still want to speak about this issue and link it with the issue of the possibility to reach out the citizens in an effective way. I give you an example. Last year, with the Institute of European Democrats, we have organized 3 kind of events. You have one workshop at the Italian office of the European Parliament in Rome, one I would say big conference in the European Parliament, and one seminar in a university in Bratislava. I'm not saying that they were just 3 events on several events. I let you guess which one was the cheapest among these 3. Of course, the workshop at the Italian office of the European Parliament. But what kind of people were there? It was just people already interested in the topic. It was already politicians. It was highly interesting. And the debate was lively. But still, with a very small amount of resources, you couldn't reach out the wider public. Still, within the European Parliament, with a big conference that costs much more than a small workshop, you are reaching out to public, but it's not the wider one. It's still people who are attending a conference in the European Parliament are the people who are here today. They are already interested in the European topic. That's why, even with the goodwill, the best use of the given resources, you cannot reach the wider public, which doesn't mean that we don't have to be optimistic in what we do, because still we are giving our contribution to a democracy which is complex. So we are one of the several elements that help the European Union to be a democracy. And also I would like to be optimistic about another thing, about the Giannakou report. We haven't talked about that so much today, but still, yes, the Giannakou report could have been a turning point, and maybe it won't. Also for political foundations, also for the lack of a legal basis. But still, I think that it has represented, and it's representing now, an important moment in which each foundation has gained renewed, renovated awareness, a self-consideration of its interests that can be also different from those of the political parties to which they are affiliated. And I think that it's a very positive element to take into account. Thank you very much.
Grazie a lei. Non so se...
Thank you very much. Mr. Bayer, did you want to come in again? Do you want to say anything?
Prego.
Yes, please. Well, I think, having heard the reports, it's clear that each foundation has done a great deal of work, and I think it demonstrates that there's a certain confidence in terms of our work. But there's another perspective here, the extent to which we're really up to the challenges. And if you look at Transform, then the challenge is clearly defined by the crisis we're grappling with and the economic and social repercussions of that. So could we, for example, imagine a European demos that would accept a 30% youth unemployment level in Spain? Well, it may be that from an ideological standpoint, certain institutions or foundations see this as a necessary evil or as part of the way things are. However, for those who are concerned about the future of Europe, then that surely has to mean that we, as political foundations, are required to think beyond the previous way we organised our work and operated. That means, for example, that political foundations needs to be more flexible in terms of our dialogue among each other than traditional political parties are able to be. Now, in Transform, for example, we're sensitive to the notion that you picked up on, of this notion of people without a state. We're also open to the recognition that politically responsible and socially inspired action can be different, can be motivated in a different way than our own socialist approach to it. So, to my mind, the question is whether we as political foundations are able to help those who are experiencing the pressure. Are we able to look forward? Are we able to be imaginative? Are we able to sit down and exchange ideas on how we see the future? Now, I'm not a member of the course, and I'm entirely inexperienced in terms of what is customary here. But I was shocked when last week I was at a briefing in terms of the financial perspectives, and I heard from a major party representative that in the run-up to the European elections there was to be a code of conduct decided, and the idea was that the four big parties in the European Parliament work on it, then that goes to the others and they have to basically sign up. Well, maybe that's a standard way for parties in this House to operate, but I think if we in Europeans wish to take responsibility for an alternative democracy, a different way of doing things other than austerity, if we are taking seriously those things that we put in our manifestos, there we need a cultural initiative. That's our responsibility to do this. To say that we need to think beyond the policies that are largely responsible for the crisis we have. That may be a starting point for future cooperation between the foundations. Well, I don't know if Professor Wojciech and Professor Van Heck wish to add one or two words, and then we'll give the floor to Professor Bardi to conclude, which means that we'll be able to finish at 1:30, and after the lunch break, we will resume at 3:30 rather than at 3. So we buy a bit of time to relax a bit. So the two academics, Professor Gagatek and Professor Van Heck.
3 points. Of course, in relatively terms, the money might be quite high, but I agree with the statement of Mr. Weinberg that, of course, there is a huge gap between the money and the mission of the European political foundations. I think it's up to the MEPs, present or absent, to change that. Then, about my comment that European political foundations might be or are ahead of the Euro parties. Why? Because there is a fine fit, a fine match, it seems, between what European political foundations have to offer to the national foundations and what national foundations have been looking for. So in that way, there is a nice ways of a collaboration, which is not the case for Euro parties. Unfortunately, this is not, of course, to say that the Euro parties have not much to offer. They do, and they would like to offer a lot. But the problem is the national parties, that they are not interested in a lot of things that the Euro parties have to offer. So the demand is rather low compared to the supply. Of course, the exceptions prove the rule, but I would like to invite everyone, if you're not convinced, to see what will happen in 2014. How much interference the national parties will accept from the European level. I don't think that will be much to see. And then finally, 5 years is fine, but very long for a honeymoon. So, and I do not want to spoil the party, but after a while, particularly from an academic point of view, we will also need to answer the research question, did European political foundations matter? Did they make a change? Because a lot has happened. It might have happened otherwise, without the statute, without the funding. And what has been the impact? So I think this is also a research agenda we bring home with us and perhaps see each other again over 5 years. Thank you.
Professor Van Eyck, vuole aggiungere?
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, or is that enough? Okay, well, thank you very much. In that case, without further ado, I'll give the floor to Professor Bardi, who will draw together the various threads from what has been a very intense morning session. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank the Secretariat of the committee you preside for the very wonderful job they did at organizing this event, which for me appeared to be very complicated. Perhaps for them it was routine business, but still they did it very well. They did it with very much competence and extreme attention to the need of the individual participants. And this does not always happen. I also want to thank Enrico Calossi, who's the coordinator of this project and who also did a wonderful job at putting everything together. Having said this, which was more a pleasure than a duty, I want to say that from my viewpoint, our viewpoint as observatory on political parties and representation, this conference is a big success. We had a number of very interesting presentations. We had very good participation on the part of the foundations, and all of this reflects a diversity which is not only linked to the different values that the foundations and the parties they are linked to represent, but also, as we were reminded a couple of times, to the different structural organizational differences and also differences in terms of resources. Taking all of this into account, however, I think this is a very successful event. Now let me say something on what I made of what was said today and what I think, on my part, is worth commenting on. I will not go through the 6 questions because some of them that I had posed, some of them would force me to be rather repetitive and redundant. Just let me focus on a couple of them. The first one on the foundation's role in general. I must say that I think 2 different foci emerged here. I think they are both present in all of the foundation's presentations, and I assume therefore in their activities, but they came out with a different emphasis. The first one is, I would say, more properly political focus. The foundations, of course, are linked to political parties, and therefore they, I shouldn't say cater to the interests of the party, but they work in close coordination with the parties. Again, this may have an organizational motivation. There are parties and foundations that have an almost bi-univocal relationship, where in some cases you have more parties that are linked to foundations and vice versa. But anyway, whatever the reasons are, I think there is this more properly political focus in some cases, and I think this is very important for democracy and for the role attributed by the regulation to the foundations. Because if the foundations have to help establish a link with society, civil society, certainly this can be done also through partisan lines. Nobody obviously prevents the establishment of a privileged link between a Euro party and its linked foundation with specific segments of society. I think, therefore, that this is very important, and I think this role, this political role, appears to have been fulfilled relatively well already in these 5 years, and I think it is positive. The second focus is what makes, and for me this is a bit more intriguing and more interesting, is the one that makes the European foundations more properly cultural foundations. In that they stress values, they stress culture, they stress links with civil society in a more general sense. And I would say this is also very important, and at some level even more fundamental. The parties, the Euro parties, know who their constituents are. As Europeans, we still don't know who the European citizens are, culturally, in terms of values. There was a big debate when the constitutional treaty was being drafted, and in the end, the question became a political issue, okay, precisely because we don't have a common understanding of what we are yet, okay? And, here I could quote the famous Italian intellectual, Massimo d'Azeglio, who after the unification of Italy said, well, we made Italy, now we have to make the Italians. Well, whatever amount of Europe we have created, we certainly have not created the Europeans yet. Huh? Okay, so this, I think, is very important. And even if it is not explicitly mentioned in the regulation, I think this is also a very important part of the task, of the mission of the foundations. Obviously, both foci have been reflected in the activities of the foundations, and here I'm coming more to, let's say, the structural organizational element. And I was very pleased to hear that a lot of this is done in terms of networks. Networks which do not limit themselves to the European, in terms of European Union dimension, but they go beyond to other European countries, and in at least a couple of cases we have heard that they go beyond Europe. There is a tension towards like-minded, or at least organized organizations in other parts of the world. And of course, globalization is a word that is used with great, emphasis, and I would say sometimes not very properly. But we must, in reality, remember that Europe is not alone in the world, and the European Union, of course, as an entity which does have an identity, should be even more aware of that. And I think this is also important. But anyway, I think that the fact that the networks exist is, and they work. Maybe you're wondering why I stress this point. It is in the regulation, so why shouldn't this be the case? Well, until things are put to work, you never know how to work out. So I'm happy to hear that they exist, because this is it is of fundamental importance, I think, to strengthen the links between the citizens at various levels, and I'll get to this in a minute, and the European institutions, and the networks can certainly do this. In our discussion, I was saying different views of democracy emerged, and we're also reminded of the relevance of the different levels of democracy. Academics have been stressing this for a very long time. It doesn't look like the same kind of interest in multi-level governance and multi-level culture, in a sense, exists with politicians. But anyway, I think today we heard that. I think it's another important point, because I think it is, if you want to create, I don't know, the word demos was used by Mr. Bayer. I don't really want to say that it is a short-term task of the foundations to create a demos, but if we want to even think about the possibility of a European demos to be created, then we have to involve, we have to try and involve all citizens with all views, all minorities in the debate at European level, at national level, at subnational level. Mr. Macias mentioned some nationalities that do not have a state. Well, those the people who belong to those nationalities are much more numerous than the population of some recognized state. Okay, so how can we leave them out? Obviously, they should feel part of Europe and be involved in the discussion. So all of these things are of fundamental importance, and I think the foundations can perform a very important role in this. The The big advantage the foundations have, and their members, their exponents, is that they don't have to win elections. They may feel that they have to help win elections, but they do not have to worry about political propaganda in a strict sense. Their message can be more honest and more clear than the parties, I believe. And this is, I think, in this time of crisis, the crisis was mentioned many times, and of course, the fact that the foundations were created and spent their 5-year honeymoon during the crisis is important. It is important because we have a new brand of Euroscepticism. You know, I've been insisting on this in every public forum I speak. So some people may have heard it already, but you know, I think it is for me too important for me not to speak about it, which is now oriented not towards European institutions, as used to be the case. It's oriented about other member states. We were reminded about the unemployment in Spain, the terrible situation in Greece, and God only knows what the spread of the Italian bonds is today after yesterday's elections. Okay, so we may have a big problem, and so the Italians will start blaming the Germans, and the Germans will say, well, you know, the Italians spent too liberally for too many years, and all of these are being built up by the parties because these are arguments that work in campaign. Okay? Well, the foundations don't have this, and they can help spread a message that does not distort reality for partisan reasons. Where am I? Finally, okay. This is linked to the networks, but with a different perspective. Some of the exponents of the foundations that spoke today, whom I thank again for having accepted our invitation, did not know each other before today. And now I hear that at least 2 or 3 of them suggest that the foundations should coordinate their activities, their actions, and perhaps even cooperate. I'm terribly pleased about this, not only because the event we organized brought them together and may have been instrumental in creating a new level at which the foundations can operate, I should say. But also, I'm happy. I'm also happy, also and most importantly, because the foundations, in assuming together what would be necessarily their less political and more cultural connotation, could take over from the parties, from where the parties may have left off. Let me elaborate a bit on this point. The progresses of European democracies and at EU level were, to a very large extent, made possible by the integrating role of political parties in the European Parliament. The history of the European Union since the draft treaty on the European Union, which was approved by the European Parliament and never ratified properly by the member states, but at least we could say from the Single European Act on, demonstrates the importance of the integrating role of the political parties. If EU politics progresses, which is something I think we should all hope, it will necessarily become more adversarial. And the integrating role of the parties maybe will not be lost completely, but it will certainly decline. I think that the foundations have the instruments to take that role. And this, of course, thanks to their networks, they can create links, direct links with society, and can perform that integrating role in society, something the parties were never able to do. The parties performed the integrating role in the institutions. And the reasons were, I had already written these notes before Stephen made his comment before, but the reasons were already mentioned by Professor Van Hecke. The reason is that the national parties compete with the Euro parties. They have their own channels through which they can access European institutions. And therefore, they never had too much use for what the Euro parties had to propose. Well, the national foundations do not have the privilege. Their only link with Europe is through the European foundations. Well, maybe a couple of German foundations can have direct access to European institutions, but not many of the other ones. Okay, and I think that this is of fundamental importance. And yes, Giulia Massotti said, well, no matter what we do, we don't reach the wide public. But the more of you get together, the more people you will reach. So I think this is what I see today is very positive, and I hope it is followed up. And thank you once again. Thank the audience for the patience, and thank again the chair, Onorevole Cassini. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bardi. Perhaps I might venture a suggestion that wraps up this morning's session. Perhaps I'm repeating what Professor Bardi said. For me, the European Year of Citizenship, and we're now of course, in the midst of that year, holding this morning's session, I think that's critical. My committee, the Constitutional Affairs Committee, began this Parliament by thinking about some elements of the Karlsruhe Constitutional Court's judgment, which have, if you like, been a guiding light for our thoughts and actions. This whole notion of a European demos, is there one? The lack of a European demos caused a great deal of head-scratching in the German Constitutional Court when it first assessed the Lisbon Treaty and then the other issues that stem from that. Some of you have expressed this very eloquently, indeed Professor Bardi as well, I think. I think the role of European foundations is to be, if you like, a network, a way of joining up Europe and the political parties. Now, I don't know if that happens elsewhere, but in Italy, it's easy for parties to point the finger at Europe when things don't work well. It's always Europe's fault. It's about passing the buck and staving off criticism. But it's also a way of avoiding working to build a European demos. And I think the foundations have this role. What they should be doing, and I think they are, is to build the underlying fabric of the European society, really trying to point the way forward and to bring together the different threads at the European level. Now, for me, I think Europe, the United Europe, is the biggest, the greatest political project in history. We have never seen, without violence and upheaval, people coming together in the name of common ideals to work together towards a common goal. It's a tough job, a very difficult job, and it means that you need to look beyond the difficulties of every day, the things that we struggle with in the day-to-day political fight, but we need to keep aloft the ideals and the views that have built the European project. Now, I think, aside from their ideological differences, aside from their links to the political parties, I think the foundations have that role. I certainly think that is the message that I've taken out of today's session. So thank you very much. The Secretariat will now pass on the necessary information for the lunch break. I won't be there this afternoon. The first Vice Chair, Mrs. Gurmai, will chair the session, and we will continue at 3:30 rather than 3 o'clock as initially advertised. So some information from the Secretariat.
Yes. About the lunch break, those of you who are invited to the reception offered by the President of the Parliament, you will find that reception just outside this meeting room. That concerns the speakers mostly. Those of you who want to have lunch in the Parliament's canteen can do it, and Mrs. Greek will, she's back there, Mrs. Greek will guide you there. And those of you who are leaving the building by now, either for lunch break or for today, the whole day, so those will be guided out by Mrs. Koenig there. And those of you who are coming back for the afternoon session, that will start at 3:30, and that will concern the other things than this morning's session. You will be met by the same entrance where you came in this morning. Okay, I wish you bon appétit.